So, without any further ado, well, let's begin. I have Pierce Brown with you.
Hi, my name is Pierce Brown. Nice to see you guys. I want to thank you guys so much for coming today and for sharing the beautiful city with me. I've had far too much to drink in the days before this, and I hear that's a good thing here. So,
yeah, we like that in everyone. So, the first one is a rather obligatory question. How do you like Budapest?
You mean Bucharest, right? No. No, I came here 10 years ago, and it's been incredible to see it change so much since I was here. But I was 19 then, and I don't remember very much of it because, well, you're noticing a pattern here.
Have you done some sightseeing this time?
I have. I sometimes go full tourist, and so I went up on the Budapest Eye, the Ferris wheel, and then I saw things I wanted to go to, and I just went there. So I went to the castle twice, because I like castles a lot, and the National Gallery, and pretty much every pizzeria, and along the way. I think I had 3 lunches yesterday.
Like a true puppet.
Exactly. 3rd lunches, yeah. I don't think he knows about 2nd breakfasts. But you do.
That's fine. We like people who can eat, don't we? But you still look pale. Are Agave fitting you well?
Just my natural Scottish complexion. Yeah.
Do you find Hungarian wine and palinka to your golden status worthy to your golden status?
I'm sorry, say that again?
Do you find Hungarian palinka and wine to your liking?
Oh, I do, but that's not saying much. I mean, if it has liquor in it, I'll eat it or drink it. Like the cherry cordials, when I was a kid, I would eat all of them out of my mom's stash, and I thought I was getting drunk off the alcohol in it. And then so I'm like acting all like I'm like 13. I'm like, oh my god! And then I found out they're non-alcoholic cherry cordials. So I was faking alcoholism at 13. But yeah, that's very delicious. Yes.
What is your favorite music? Song? Like a song?
In general?
Yeah.
Oh man, that's really hard. You're gonna make fun of me. I really like Fields of Gold by Sting. My mom makes fun of me for listening to it, but I like that one. What else is my favorite? I mean, Johnny Cash's rendition of Hurt by 9 Inch Nails is one of my favorites. I also like, what is it? Thug Mansion by Tupac. I know, you totally would have predicted that by my books. Yeah. Oddly enough, I listen to Tupac music when I write Severo's character, and I also listen to Biggie when I write Severo, so it's like 90s rap is highly influential in making some of the characters. Pretty much just Severo because he has a potty mouth, so.
And what is your favorite movie?
Lawrence of Arabia. Yeah. Or I'll try something better. Harry Potter?
You never heard
Actually, probably Empire Strikes Back. I mean, it's too good. Yeah, it made me cry at 9 years old. It made me cry like 2 days ago, so I love that movie.
Your favorite video game?
There's like 20 questions here. Favorite video game? Baldur's Gate 2? Anyone? Okay. Something more popular. I love the original Halo, but I also like, I played World of Warcraft far too much. I was a badass night elf rogue. Yeah, that was fun.
Still playing?
No, I quit 10 years ago. Yeah, no. What happened is I lost my password. And that's it. I lost my password, and Blizzard thought I was trying to hack my own account. And then it was like this really hard process to get back on it. And then I thought, wait, if I spent like, no. What happened is I saw how long I've been playing, because you can look up how long you've been playing, and it said I played 28 days worth of hours. And I was like, this is not healthy. So I had to quit. Yeah, anyway.
Your favorite book, novel or otherwise?
This is so hard. Dune, maybe, by Frank Herbert, or Lord of the Flies, or Count of Monte Cristo. Or there's so many ors, never mind. Like a lot of ors, yeah.
And the final favorite question, so you can relax.
Oh, actually, my favorite book. I'm glad you agree. Thank you.
Your favorite weapon?
I feel like that's an incriminating question.
Nice.
All right, icicle. Yeah, because it disappears.
I like the way you
I'm
think.
sorry, or my bicep. Yes. No.
Yeah, I mean, God or Satan, you know.
Yeah. Or Wonder Woman's whip. I mean, the lasso, but that'd be fun to use. Yeah. Or, no more horse. Pulse fists.
So, I understand you weren't born an author. How did you become one then?
No, I was not born an author. I was, however, born apparently a storyteller. So I had this thing when I was young, because I wouldn't admit that I was tired, and I would be in the backseat of the car just talking nonstop. So whenever I get tired, I get more talkative to prove that I'm not tired. And so I would just be telling stories to my parents in the backseat, and then they'd look around and I'd just be like going straight to it. And they would always be worried because mid-sentence I would just stop, and they have like recordings of this. So sometimes whenever they want to embarrass me in front of like my girlfriend or whatever, they bring out these recordings and it's just like, and that was me at 25. So I think I moved around a bunch when I was a kid. I lived in 8 different states in the United States, and some of them were in cities, but my favorite ones were in the countryside, where I could live near the woods or the mountains, because my dad would give me a walkie-talkie, and I would go out into the woods and he'd call me home when it was time for dinner. And so I would take my books out there and I'd go build forts. And that probably made me a storyteller more than anything else, because when you're out there, you're either not talking or you're talking to yourself. And I'm a pretty good company to myself, so so I found out years later that my dad actually followed me into the woods sometimes just to make sure I wasn't doing anything bad, like rappelling from trees or something. And he thought I was insane for the first few years of my life, because I'd be out there digging a hole, saying blah, 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 blah. So, you know, I think that there's just this component of loving stories so much, and you know, loving, for instance, Star Wars when I was a kid, and I would, after the movies, you know, there were only 3 of them back then, and there's still only 3 of them, in my humble opinion. But I would recycle the story in my head and wonder what happened to Luke, Leia, and Han afterwards, and I would kind of build out the story myself. And then I discovered the Star Wars Extended Universe books, and I fell in love with those. And I think it was just the constant revitalization of stories I loved, either through telling it to myself or reading it and not being able to take friends with me when I went to a new city, because I'd be 2 years in one city, then we'd leave. And so I think that a lot of it was being the only thing I could take with me, you know, was the stories you have, and that becomes more important sometimes than those human connections you have. So,
I see.
long answer. Yeah.
I've also read somewhere that you wrote a lot of stuff in a specific garage.
Oh, yeah. Which garage?
My point exactly.
Well, I wrote 5 books above my parents' garage, and then 1 book in a professor's garage, which does not sound as creepy as it sounds. It does sound creepy. No, it was not as creepy as it sounds. My political science professor, when I moved to Los Angeles, I couldn't afford rent, because have you guys ever seen the TV show 30 Rock? Okay, so I was Kenneth the Page. Like, I had a peacock tie, and I worked on the NBC lot giving tours. So like, and here you have Johnny Carson's old studio. And I would just kind of make up stories when I was there, but they paid you like, you know, pennies. And so I had to live with my political science professor because he was nice enough to give me a room. But the room was in his garage. And so I wrote out there, yeah.
And does this have to do anything with your protagonist, you know, rising up from underground?
Well, he wasn't in a garage, was he? Have you really? Yeah, no. If the whole story was just Darrow's an auto mechanic, he comes out of the garage of years of servitude. Yeah. I think so. More so, I lived in Iowa for a while, which is Midwestern. It's farm country, and every movie you've seen about Iowa is pretty much true. It's just fields and corn. And so I lived amongst the fields in corn. And then I moved down to Texas, and I got into a very wealthy school there. Like all my friends were wealthy, we weren't, but I was like the only one who wasn't in my class, and I always felt kind of like a spy or someone looking on the outside. And these people were all, you know, they just lived a different lifestyle than me, and so I always felt like I had to pretend to fit in. And so I think that might be kind of the roots of where Dale came from, not necessarily the garage.
What are your specific writing methods? And I'm gonna specify that. Do you write a lot of outlines, or do you just go ahead?
Outlines, what are those? No. My first 3 books, I did not write any outlines. And then I love the experience of exploring on the page. And when you write an outline, you usually do it over the course of a couple months, but there's only, a few moments of aha, the light bulb going off, the inspiration. But when you're writing along and you write yourself into a hole, then you try to figure your way out of it. It creates this kind of natural tension. And that natural tension is really fun because I'm exploring when I don't have an outline. But then Random House, my publisher in the US, decided I needed an outline for the other ones because they were seeing me like just tearing my hair out. And I contractually, in my contract, I had to have an outline. And so when it was time to give them my iron gold outline, I sent them like 5 bullet points of my outline. And my editor's like, what the fuck, man? And I was like, this took you a month? And I'm like, yeah. And it'll take me 3 months to do 5 more lines. So can I just write it? So I got away with it there. But then with Dark Age, the next book in the series, I had to do an extensive outline. So I actually spent 3 months, and I treated it like I was actually writing a book. So it's like a 25-page outline. And it's like all the kind of pivotal events, all the character deaths, all the other things. Because I used to get surprised by the character deaths. I'd just be writing and be like, oh, well, I can kill this person now. Every single character, by the way, in the book series has died in a rough draft. Every single one. And it's been corrected. Like Mustang has perished in many drafts. But I always decided that it wasn't right at the time, so I'm like, that feels unnatural and forced, so I took it out. So it's kind of this process of exploring, which is exciting. And then for Dark Age, it was a new process because there was so many stories, so many arcs and characters involving each other, and the canvas is so much larger that I had to do it. So I've had to learn this new discipline. So, pretty good ways through Dark Age now, and it's been pretty fun. So who knows what I'll write for the next one.
During the day, when do you write?
Morning. So I wake up and I start writing by 8 o'clock, and I usually write until about 2 o'clock, and then I take a break. And some days I'll come back to it, other days I won't, but I'll either write 5 hours a day or like 10 hours a day. And so I usually take that break, and it depends whether or not I'm trying to read to kind of reinvigorate myself, if I'm trying to watch movies, or if my dog needs attention and needs a walk, which in her mind is always like literally I'll take my dog for a walk and she'll come back and be like, cool, when are we going for a walk? And I'm like, God, your brain's a peanut. And so to be honest, my dog distracts me from writing more than anything else. My girlfriend's easy, my dog not so much. My girlfriend's like, shouldn't you be writing? I'm like, leave me alone, because she likes the books too, so she makes me write, which is helpful. But I usually do that 5-6 hour chunk in the morning because I think it's really important not to look at social media or your phone when you're writing, because as I say it, like if you break down the brain and the way you think based on like how Freud looked at it, you have your id, which kind of informs all your decisions, but you really can't tap into. You have your subconscious, which informs a lot of your actions and where creativity comes from, and you have your consciousness. But I think that phones make us be conscious, so you check a text message, you check the news to see what's happened politically, and especially like relevant now because everything seems to be one dour note, but you check it and it affects the way your brain's working because it pulls you back into consciousness. But all art is created in the subconscious. When you are free-flowing, relaxing, and if anyone here is a writer, you know that you're good at writing 5 minutes into writing, not when you first start, when you finally forget what you're doing, or any task, when you're sitting down to write a paper, when you're doing your normal job, you're not good the first 5 minutes. That's the hardest thing in the world. Especially like getting up in the morning and going to work is like sometimes the worst part of a lot of the highly successful people's day. But when they're in it, they feel great. And so for me, it's about trying to eliminate the parts where I'm conscious of writing and trying to eliminate phones, distractions, TV, anything but music. And so I'll try to stay in that subconscious area for as long as possible. So what I do is I set a timer, and I'm not allowed to look at the clock until it goes off, and that timer is 5 hours long. And so I can't check whether or not I have 2 hours left. I have to keep going. And so existing in that kind of mystery land of time, because you don't know where it is, it kind of stretches out sometimes it shortens, really enables you to kind of relax and free yourself of the stress. Because otherwise I'm thinking about bills, I'm thinking about, you know, taxes, I'm thinking about, am I gonna walk my dog, you know? And I think that it's very difficult to create that way. Like, because I wrote, when I first started writing, it was really difficult to find time to write, because I was working 2 jobs at the time. And so I had to write, you know, from 5 in the morning till 8, or, you know, 7 at night until like 10. And I was always distracted by the work I had to do, and it was much slower. But now it's more fun because I'm a full-time writer. But you have to have that discipline not to let yourself succumb to the distractions of the modern world.
But you do listen to music.
I do listen to music, yeah.
And lyrics don't disturb you?
Depends. Sometimes they do, sometimes they don't. Certain songs you have to listen to lyrics, other ones you can't. It doesn't matter. But usually it's orchestral stuff, or music score. I'm sorry, film scores, things like that. Yeah.
Did you learn anywhere how to write, like any courses or something?
No. I did not learn from courses. The same thing. Like I started off as a history major. And then once I was about halfway through my degree, I realized that all the history I wanted to read was not being taught on the syllabus. And so I decided to stop being a history major and just read what I wanted to read history on the side, and then focus on things I would not do, like economics by myself. So I became an economics major because I knew I sure as hell was not reading that for fun. I read economics now to go to sleep. It's great. You don't need sleeping pills. Try to understand Keynesian economics from a macroeconomic perspective from 1970s, being informed by the Guatemalan Revolution is a very difficult thing to wrap your head around. So I just don't try and I fall asleep. It's great. But anyway, for what was the question? This happens all the time, by the way.
So did you study? Right?
Oh, no, I didn't study. I mean, I look at the study I did as being the first. So I wrote 6 books before I wrote Red Rising, and those 6 books taught me a lot of lessons. I mean, my first book was a 750-page, huge, epic fantasy. It was ridiculous. So bad. Oh, God, okay, here's the story. So my mom, I hadn't had anyone read it. I just was holed up in my room above my parents' garage. We just moved to Seattle, and I had just graduated high school, so I didn't know anyone, and there was no way I was going to get to know anyone before I went to college. So I was living above my parents' garage, and you know, I write this book and I come downstairs and I have it printed off, and it's literally this thick. And because I didn't think about doing double-sided, I don't know why, I just like, let's chop down a tree. So I gave it to my mom, and she said, oh, honey, I'm so proud of you. I'm so happy you wrote a book. I'd love to read it. And I gave it to her, and she's like, oh my God. But then she looked and it wasn't double-sided, and she did, okay. But she said, I'll get back to you on this. So, a couple weeks go by, and I'm expecting her to have read it in like 2 days. And my mom was this kind of hard-charging working woman, so we moved around the country following her job. So she's kind of a badass businesswoman, but when she gets home, all she did back then, because she's stressed out from work, was watch The Bachelor with a big glass of wine. So she's sitting there watching The Bachelor, and she's like, I think Grace is so dramatic. No, Veronica's going to win this season. Just mark my words, Veronica's the top dog. And so I'm sitting there just kind of judging my mom for watching The Bachelor, thinking that, she'd be reading my stuff. So about 3 weeks go by, I ask her, hey Mom, so did you get a chance to read it? She says, not yet, honey. 4 weeks go by, I'm like, have you got a chance to read it? She says, yes. And I'm like, what did you think? She says, I loved it. Frankly, it's just amazing for you to have finally found your passion. I'm so happy to see you. I saw so much of you in these characters. And I said, who's your favorite character? And she says, the main one. So alarm bells are going off, right? And I'm like, so what did you think of Adrian? And she says, Adrian was probably my second favorite character. I found a lot of you in there, to be honest. And I said, Mom, Adrian's not a character in the book. And so, that's how bad the original books can be. 700 pages of you emulating someone. It was, I don't falter. It was called Requiem for Light. I know, very pretentious. And knights rode around on Pegasuses, huge Pegasuses that were like the size of buildings, throwing lances at each other. It was very exciting for me, but for no one else. So then I wrote 5 books after that in like various different genres. So I look at that as my education for writing. Because to be honest, I think any writer worth their salt will tell you that you can be taught things, but you're not going to learn until you fail. And the only way to fail is to write. And the only way to get better is to keep writing. So, like, no one loves their first draft, right? And I didn't love my first 6 first drafts, so, yeah.
Which authors inspire you the most?
Quite a few. I mean, I love J.K. Rowling, defined part of my childhood. I love J.R.R. Tolkien, Frank Herbert, who else? Alexander Dumas, Jane Austen. I love Pride and Prejudice.
Did you just hear that?
I have a crush on Mr. Darcy, I'm sorry. You guys, have you ever seen the BBC miniseries? Yeah. It's so good. Colin Firth? Yeah. I watched that when I was like 11 and I was like, that's a cool guy. You can just tell, that guy's cool. Now I watch it, I'm like, that guy has really bad social skills, because he's just like, you know, that's his emotion. Who else? William Golding, Lord of the Flies. Bernard Cornwell, who does military history. He does Sharpe's Rifles, or the Viking series, which is Saxon Chronicles, which is now on the BBC. Who else? There's so many. Stephen Pressfield, Michael Chabon. There'll be a lot more. Michael Crichton. Dan Simmons. Dan Simmons is great. Yeah. There's just a few of them. Wow, should I keep going?
I think it's enough for now.
Ooh, Robert Heinlein, Asimov, yeah. Jerry Pournelle, Larry Niven, yeah. I know.
I'm able to start him. Unstoppable right now.
My bookshelves are hilarious. Like, there's just so much weird stuff on there.
And if you have to pick the best sci-fi novel ever written, apart from Golden Sun,
Yeah, apart from Golden Sun, yeah.
which is, in my opinion, the best one, which one would you pick?
That's hard. Dune is pretty good. Dune's amazing because it mixes science fiction and fantasy in a way that is just makes it feel like kind of a myth out of time, which I think is what inspired me to write Red Rising, is because I love the melding of the mythology along with the science fiction, because what's that quote? Any sufficiently sophisticated technology will look like magic for the uninitiated. So Dune had this like just beautiful mythological tapestry, and it felt like you're reading a piece of history. And I hadn't been familiar with that in science fiction until I guess I read Dan Simmons' Hyperion, which is another one of my favorites, where he mixes John Keats and kind of Canterbury Tales together. And I think those two are probably 2 of my favorites, but I also really enjoy some of the Star Wars books, like Timothy Zahn's Thrawn series, just awesome. If you like blue-skinned aliens taking down the Rebel Alliance, it's your jam. Yeah.
In your opinion, what is your greatest achievement as an author? Up to date.
Filling this room out in Budapest. Yeah. Oh. I don't know. It's the fact that people can debate which of their books is the favorite, and for different merits, and the books all being different. I think that that's really important to me. But also, I think that what I really love is the individual moments that come with touring, because I've lived with these books in my life for 8 or 9 years, and it's very difficult to get a perspective on something, like coming back to your apartment or your home after being gone for a month, or after being gone for a couple weeks, or going home after being in school for a long time. You start realizing and appreciating how wonderful it is to be back in bed. That's something you take for granted. So these books I take for granted sometimes. And that's why I love touring, and being able to see it through your eyes, and particularly to be able to see it through people who aren't American, in their eyes, and seeing the different interpretations it has in different cultures. That's my favorite thing, and I think that the greatest accomplishment is enjoying what you do and not wanting to do anything else. and realizing that on a day-to-day basis is my favorite thing. So,
What do you think is more important in sci-fi? World building or characters and story?
it depends on how you define important. I think that what attracts me to science fiction is the tapestry you can make out of it, the world you can make, but then the characters you put in it define it. Because if it was just Red Rising and it was like, you know, a travel guide, it wouldn't be that fun. And I think that's what sets the series a bit apart, is the concentration on characters and the concentration on building family in it. And a lot of the science fiction I read when I was younger, which has been the best world building ever, is a little bit shy on the character building front. I think that's why I like Dune so much, is because it's strong on characters. I mean, House Atreides and House Harkonnen are so strongly envisioned. And that's why Star Wars is fantastic. So I think that, man, it's hard. They have to go hand in hand, I guess. But I think you can have good sci-fi without having good world building. I don't think you can have good sci-fi without having good characters, because then it's very difficult to watch or to read. But then again, you do have good sci-fi. I don't know. It's really hard because Asimov didn't really make the best characters, but Foundation is awesome. So who might? I don't know. I don't know that answer. Skip it.
I have a fan question.
Ah.
Yeah, David wants to know the following. If I know well, if I heard well, before publishing Red Rising, you were like turned down by multiple publishing houses. Is that true?
Yeah, I'm very accustomed with rejection. I was turned down by 130 different agents before I wrote Red Rising, and then I was turned down by 32 agents for Red Rising. And then in 1 week, 4 agents wanted to represent me. What the hell happened that week, I don't know. It was a very strange process, but for 6 years, I just kept sending out manuscripts and kept getting rejection. And then ended up being the assistant for one of the people that rejected me 6 different times. The assistant who asked me to be her first client, and I decided to go with her. And she was 24 or 23, and I was 23 at the time as well. And so it was kind of amazing to find someone young, because they had the time, because I was their only client, but they had the time to really shop it. But yeah, no, I think that's one of the hardest things, is the easiness of defeat. Because it comes pretty often in publishing, and it's very hard to get your book out there. And even if it does get out there, it's very hard to distinguish yourself. And so there was I think there were no publishing houses that rejected it. But once I had my agent, and once we started taking it out, we had several young adult publishing houses in the United States that wanted to publish it, but they wanted me to change significant parts of the story. They wanted me to begin, for instance, at the Institute and not have anything in the mines. They wanted the violence and some of the themes to be toned down to be more accessible, and that wasn't what I was interested in doing. And so I went with an adult sci-fi publisher that had only done adult sci-fi and adult fantasy, and I found that to be a great home. But it was really, really strange, having to reject places who wanted to publish my book because it just felt wrong, because it's not where I wanted the series to go.
And what made you still go on despite all this rejection?
Sheer belief in my own intelligence. See, mostly when I fail, I get pissed off. So that's very good sometimes, not very good other times. If I'm playing kickball or something, it's not good if you're on my team and we lose. But for publishing, it made me frustrated in a positive way, because it just made me work harder. So if anything, I wrote faster when I got rejected. And I think that you can either choose to let your defeats defeat you and to shatter your self-confidence, or you can learn from them and look at it as something to overcome. And I think it's easier for me to look at it as something to overcome, because it just frustrates me being told no by publishing houses. And I was just like, how dare you? Yeah. But also, to be honest, I knew I hadn't told the story that I loved yet. I liked those other books, but I wasn't confident in them. And when I wrote Red Rising, I just fell in love with it, and I was so excited to write that world. Like a really fun book or video game that you just can't wait to sink back into, and you're at school or doing at work, and you're just aching to go back to it. That's how it was when I was writing Red Rising. I couldn't be away from the computer, and that's how I knew that I had to keep writing.
Now let's turn to the specific books you wrote.
Sure.
Georgina wants to know, I would like to ask Piers, what was easier for you when you started working on Red Rising, the world building part or coming up with the intricate plot?
I'm glad she thinks it's intricate. That's good. The world building was really easy. The world building was really fun because world building is just, it's just me being in a sandbox being like, that's cool, and then having to bring it into the plot, like, why is that cool? Why does that matter? I mean, my editors laugh at me sometimes because I'll have like 6 pages of world building and I'll be so excited about it, and then they'll be like, we're gonna keep these 2 lines. I'm like, no! And then they'll say, no, we'll use it later. I'm like, oh, okay. We never use it later. They lied to me, and they tricked me and deceived me into being like, oh, we'll use it later. It wasn't a wasted 7 days. No, and we never use it. I did not remember this until now, and I'm very frustrated. I'm going to go back to America with a chip on my shoulder. Yeah. I'm going to have to talk with those editors, man. No. So I think world building is something that is so fun because you're like, it's just kind of continuing to add texture and depth. And that's what I think really excites me. But the plot is hard because it has to make, like especially for Morning Star, because a plot, like to end something well, has to be unpredictable, but also feel inevitable. So you have to be surprised that it had happened, but it also has to feel earned and deserved and like it's meant to be, you know? And so being surprising as well as feeling, oh, that was supposed to happen, of course that happened, it's a very hard thing to do. And so trying to figure that out was kind of a monster in my head. But also not outlining, so I'm like, you know, I'm like on page 240 and I'm like, how does this book end, you know? Yeah, I mean, Golden Sun initially ended with a wedding, for instance. And then I sent it back to my my editor and didn't tell him that I changed everything. And so he's reading it, ha 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 ha. And then I just get a text message saying, what the fuck? Because we did not agree to kill any of those characters, and I killed like 3 of his favorites. Because, you know, yeah, sorry if you haven't read the book, but people die.
You do rely heavily upon the Roman age, Roman myth, Roman themes and morals as well. Did you have to do much research for that?
Oddly, no. I was just always obsessed with Roman history, so I have to do less research on that than I have to do on like the astral movements of planets and stuff like that. And then sometimes they're inconvenient, so I just say that they changed the rotational pattern of a planet, which is nice. They have sufficient technology. It looks like magic to you, I know, but the research sometimes, mostly for military structure, using certain right names and for some of the kind of anthropological stuff, but mostly it's from kind of the mythology and the bases is stuff I knew as a kid, because I just grew up with that. I mean, my first coloring book was a coloring book of the Iliad, the Trojan War. I don't know what my parents were on, but they gave me a book of the Trojan War. But the funny thing is, it was like, my Trojan War was fabulous. Everyone is in purple and pinks, and like the blood is like purple coming out of them. These are like really fabulous guys. It's like a hippie trip. Yeah. It's like it's Woodstock meets the Trojan War. It's great.
So behind every good story is another good story. What's the story behind Red Rising? What inspired you to write that one?
Couple things. I mean, man. Well, I was reading the book, and I'll give you a full summary here. I'd been dating a girl for 2 years, and then we broke up, and I was feeling this point in my life where I didn't know my own identity because I thought I was going to be an investment banker, God knows why. And then I interned with an investment bank and thought that they were all just terrifying. And so I bailed on that. And so instead, I ended up pretending that I was going to go to law school. So I applied to law school, I took all the tests, I prepared for it, and then I was midway through the test, and I had this like epiphany that this wasn't for me. And because I'm like, wait, you're telling me there's people as smart and smarter than I that like this? I'm never going to survive. Because it was just like miserable to me. And so halfway through the test, I pretty much just stopped taking the test. And I realized I was never going to go to law school, never going to pursue it. So I was kind of feeling rudderless because I knew I liked to tell stories. I'd already written 4 books, or 6 books at this point, that hadn't succeeded, so I was wondering if I was even good at writing. And I was assuming that I wasn't, and I was doing it just for myself. Because kind of all those dreams you have, you're going to write your first book and become a sensation, had been completely defeated, and I was surviving almost completely on hoping there was a story out there that I needed to tell. And so I was reading Antigone at the time, which is one of my favorite Greek plays, and I was struck by several things, notably how Antigone is a story about a girl defying the cold power of like arbitrary authority. You know, her brother was a rebel, he died, and then the tyrant of Thebes forbid her from burying her brother and giving him funeral rites. And because of that, she decided, and he said whoever gave him funeral rites and buried him would be killed. So, to honor her gods and to honor her brother, Antigone buried her brother anyway, gave him the funeral rites, and then was executed for doing so, which is where the character of Io came from. But what inspired me by that is that that story of a girl 2,500 years ago has been carried through time, through 2,500 years of times when Antigone had been more disenfranchised than she was even in her own society, yet somehow that message had been so powerful to continue to inspire people today. And I thought that that was such an incredible myth that I wanted to use that and kind of weaponize that in Io's sacrifice. But instead of doing what Antigone did just for the singular purpose of honoring her brother, I wanted to see it used as like a weapon in an uprising, and having the political attachments to that. But I also wanted to see, there's a smaller character in Antigone who is Antigone's fiancé, who doesn't understand at all what she's doing and why she's doing it. And it's his father, Creon is his father, but his father, who's the one who is the tyrant and executes Antigone. And I wanted actually to use that as my main character, is who's the person that Antigone would love, but not enough to not die for something she believed in. And how does that person who loves her so entirely, how do they come to grips with her sacrifice? Because when you're young and in love, the other person and that love is kind of the center of your world. And I think it's very difficult to understand a love where there are things that come before it. And so the dynamic I played with in Red Rising is Darrow's completely in love with his wife and doesn't understand how he's not the center of her universe. She's in love with him, but he's not the center of her universe, and she's in love with something more. And so him learning that lesson over the first book and over the second and third is kind of what the heart of Red Rising, where it came from. So I had the characters before I had the world, and I had Darrow's story and Io's story, and I wanted that to be the heart of the tale. And then discovering that, I didn't know how to put that into words really. And so I was, I climbed mountains sometimes. That sounds weird, but my friends and I, we were climbing these mountains in the Pacific Northwest, and in the Pacific Northwest they have these amazing mountains called the Olympic Mountains, Olympus. And I was climbing this one called Dragon Tail Peak with my friends in Asgard Pass. It's a really cool series of mountains out there. They have like one called Thor's Hammer, it's great. So we're like climbing at 5 o'clock in the morning, because you have to climb when the ice is hard before it gets slushy during the day, but when you have enough daylight to actually be climbing. And so we're all crampons on our feet, we're all tied together, we're going up this mountain, and all I was thinking about is how I wish the gravity was less. So I'm like, well, the gravity's less on Mars, and then I'm like, Mars, Antigone. And it literally spawned from that because I was reading Antigone on the way up there. And so this kind of confluence of things came together at the right time to make it. Yeah, long story, but basically the genesis began with the emotions of the story, with the characters of the story, the theme, and then I started populating the world with the themes I liked as a kid.
Now, there are a lot of labels attached to your series, like dystopia, young adult, sci-fi, anti-utopia even. Are there any labels you do agree with?
I don't agree with labels. I mean, have you read the books? Yeah, it's like, no, I mean, I think that the whole idea of labels is to help us find something in a bookstore, or so people can, I kind of disagree with it, fundamentally, but I think that they can all apply. But I don't understand then why all science fiction isn't dystopian. I mean, shouldn't all science fiction be dystopian if there's tension at all in the story, and if good guys haven't won? So like, I think the only sci-fi that's not dystopian would be Star Trek. But Star Wars is. It's the evil empire, you know? And so, but it's not grouped in as a dystopian. I think we're just in a moment in time where dystopian is a popular word. But also, yeah, sure, it has roots in 1984, has roots in like kind of Animal Farm and those types of things. So I agree with, I guess, that classification. I also would say it's sci-fi, but I also think that science fiction is too narrow a name. I think science fantasy is more what it is, which is like what Dune is, which is what Star Wars is, which is what Star Trek is, but Star Trek is a little bit more sci-fi because of its reliance on, you know, a lot of the mythology and stuff. But yeah, I don't know, a lot of things can apply to it, sure.
Spoilers ahead. Who hasn't read the books yet? Raise your hands.
Okay, so people around him, you can throw things at him. Oh, definitely her, definitely her.
You don't have to go out anyway.
Just get, what's that old school line? Earmuffs.
Yeah, it's a one. Sit back. So Darrow goes all the way to in becoming a hero from, you know, the poor guy in the countryside, basically. Isn't it? That's the theme. So he has his harrowing, and he rises from the ashes again and again, and all this for vengeance.
See, okay, we had a very amazing Hollywood producer who wanted to make the movie, and he said, I asked him what the story was to him, and he said it's a tale of vengeance, and I knew right then that he wasn't the right person to make it, because the entire point of Red Rising is that it's not about vengeance, it's about maturing away from vengeance, to look outside your own individual emotions, your own individual vendetta, and to find something that is more, living for more. Because that's the entire thesis, is to live for more than yourself, live for more than the small things. And so I think of it as a journey of a human being understanding what sacrifice means, and also trying to understand the woman he loved. Like, that's how I look at it. Now, that's not as scintillating as a tale of revenge and bloodshed. But it can be that, it can be a lot of things. But I think that the first two books feel like a tale of revenge to a degree. But it's about maturing away from that for me.
Still, you have a lot of betrayal and vengeance in the books. So I was feeling kind of sorry, you know, what kind of a life you led before writing the books.
Well, they say write what you know, and the headings have been in my past. We've all had moments when we've been betrayed. Yes. I really wanted that sandwich, but my friend Sammy took it. So never mind, I did not kill Sammy. He's alive.
Who is your favorite character in the series?
Ooh. I feel like I'm gonna hurt some feelings if I say anything. Sophocles. Also, randomly, my dog looks like Sophocles, and so people ask me, did I write Sophocles to be my dog? But no. If you haven't seen my dog, I pity you because she's beautiful. But my friend rescued her off the street in Los Angeles, so she was running around in traffic and she was about this big. She'd been dumped on the side of the road in a box, along with three of her brothers and sisters. And they found her, lured her over, or chased her down to stop traffic, and chased her down for 3 blocks, brought her in. And so then they had me come over to their house because they'd been wanting me to get a dog for a while, because my dog the year before had passed away. And I went over to their house, and I had no intentions of having a dog at all. And so then they put this dog in my arms, and I'm like, oh, she's beautiful, you know, and she's cuddling, and all of a sudden then they say, well, she's red, she's, you know, small, she's in need of love, we named her Io. And I'm just like, oh no, I'm gonna have a dog. So I literally started tearing up, and I'm like, I'll take her. And so they cheated by naming her after Io, which is total bogus. So that was a betrayal in some way, you know, manipulation at least. And so, what was the question? When I start talking about my dog, I get all flustered.
Your favorite character?
Oh, yeah, my dog, Sophocles.
And which of your characters do you hate the most, if any?
Oh, I don't hate any of them. I think because I actually like the characters that are meant to be hated. I mean, like Rogue is a fun character to write. The Jackal was my favorite character to probably write, because the Jackal is just a vessel for all of my dark thoughts, you know? Because it's just like, he's kind of like a little, he's the Slytherin in your brain, you know? Because everyone's got a little Slytherin except for you noble Hufflepuffs. And I think that the more characters hated, the more fun they are, unless they start taking away characters I really like. That's annoying, but it gets really complicated, because I love Lorne, but he took away one of my favorite characters, Tactus. So I was angry at Lorne, and then I'm like, wait, I did that. you know, that's the difficulty. You actually start projecting your own anger at characters. And so like I killed the character off, I'm like, ha, should like proves you wrong. And I was like, wait, I was the one who made myself upset at something they did. Oh, this is weird, you know. So it's kind of funny. It ends up kind of going around in circles in your mind, and I think it's just like layers of your own weirdness coming out. Because every character is like a portion of you, you know, a little bit. It's like, or at least your perception of something, or your idea of the way something is. And so it's hard to have a hated character. There is one character in the new ones which I despise, and you'll find out who they are in the next book. They are in this book, but you don't know what they're about to do, and I just despise them for that. Yeah. Or I guess I despise myself for that. I don't know.
Now, Morning Star is quite a biblical name, or is it?
It is, yeah. I was having trouble naming the book, and so whenever I'm having trouble coming up with a name for something, I just read one of three books: the Iliad, Paradise Lost, or the Bible. And I just was reading through it, and I was going through Revelations, and I saw Morning Star, and I'm like, oh yeah, Morning Star is another name for Satan, Lucifer, Lightbringer, but it's also a name for Jesus, so it's references both. And I thought I wanted that duality because Morning Star is about Darrow. And well, every book's name up until this series has been Darrow, Red Rising, Golden Sun, and then Morning Star. And then I realized I actually had used Morning Star in book 2. And I thought, oh, well, that's lovely. It's almost like I planned it. And so I looked very clever on accident. And I realized I needed that duality because, and that was in the first draft. And so, I mean, as I started writing and rewriting it, I started seeing I needed the duality because when you're creating a character, and especially in a book with so many fun secondary and tertiary characters, I think the most fun is to see how other characters perceive them and how they're looked at in their own world by different people. And so I wanted to use Morning Star, which has duality to the name, and being able to see him as a hero and a villain, especially the later books in the series. So it was a happy coincidence of reading Revelations. Yeah. We had such bad names, though. There were such bad ones. My agent, love her to death, brilliant woman, wanted it to be the reaping color, and I was just like, no, it's terrible sounding. Sorry, I outed her there. What was the first name for it? If I remember, I'll tell you. It was dreadful. Yeah, but I also ran out of colors because I got asked by Zoltan here about why I didn't use another color in the naming convention. But I started thinking about all the other colors I could use, you know. Yellow should not be in the title. Like, what would it be, Yellow Rain? I think not. I don't think Orange can be in the title because I think Clockwork Orange already used that one up, so I couldn't do that. Violet? Violet's not like Violet Dawn. Everyone would think it was Violet Dawn, and then I'd have to constantly like spell check people. So I just didn't have many options, you know, in terms of colors. Yeah, anyway.
Now here we have the Hungarian title is The Years of Chaos. So that's what the book promises us.
Oh, for Iron Gold?
Yeah.
The Years of Chaos? Oh, interesting. Artistic license. Interesting. Publisher slavers of the Darrow turns into a giant octopus. Actually, I love the covers here. They're fantastic because they kind of harken back to an older age of science fiction, and they help build that myth for me when I look at this because it opens up possibilities in my mind. So I love that. But interesting.
So that's what this book promises us. Can we really count on that?
Who here has read this book? Is it out yet? It is out yet, yeah. Oh, you guys break my little heart. Anyway, so no spoilers for this one. Yes, this book is about the aftermath of rebellion. It's about the consequences that occur when a Messiah is created, both in terms of deeds and then by myth, and how you separate the two, and what do you do with someone who is like a Napoleon or a Julius Caesar in their own time when they founded a republic, which is ruled by relative democracy. So if the people want something that is very different from what the person who created it all, protected them all, wants, who's right? And so what you have is various factions coming up in this one, and you start seeing power vacuums filled. And I was very much inspired by that's in our own world, but also what happens, after what happened after the French Revolution, but also what happened after Arab Spring in Libya and in Egypt in particular. And it very much is about people finding opportunities from all different parts of the color system, finding opportunities to assert their own power. And so many of these people have long been dormant, and they've just been seeds. Because like the seeds, the tyrants are not created by themselves often. They're created by the seeds planted by the sins of the generation before. And if you look at how World War II came to be, that seed was planted after World War I, and almost every time it happens, it's planted by the generation before. So what seeds did Darrow plant that he won't be able to undo? That's what the book's about.
Are you going to break our hearts again?
Why do you even ask? Yeah.
If poised against each other, who would win, Darrow or Pierce Brown?
The pen is mightier than the sword in this case. No, I think I'd get my ass kicked. Unless I had, well shit, sorry. Where are we fighting? Someone give us an example, where are we fighting? I need an answer. Are we fighting on space? In space? Are we fighting on a sand dune?
Let's do it right here.
Right here?
Yeah.
No,
Just aside.
no, I'd lose. The only time I'd actually win is if I had like a Death Star. Yeah. With a non-vulnerable exhaust port.
Let's talk colors. Which color would you belong to?
Oh, I just thought how amazing it would be if I wrote this. It'd be so great if this would be such a great press clipping if I wrote this series and then I revealed I was colorblind. That would have been such a good PR move. Oh, sorry, what were you saying?
So what color would you belong to?
Ooh, probably violet. Although that childhood sounds like really intense because they take like acid when they're 9, and then they grow up in these basically using a lot of controlled substances in order to diminish their qualitative functions and to enhance their free association. So they're pretty insane. I don't know. I was on the path to being a silver, but then I started as a red. I don't know, man. Maybe I'd be. I wouldn't be a gold because your life expectancy is like this big. Also, if you say you're a gold, I don't trust you. You're like a very conceited person, you know?
No, I just really
What
want...
color would you be? Well, if you say gold, we're gonna have some problems.
No, I'm just a little red, right?
Oh, that's really relatable, yeah.
An humble.
I actually probably would be red because the most important thing in my life is my family, and reds are the only ones who function that way. You know, silvers are certainly not that way. We learn more about the kind of the social structures within the colors throughout this series as we explore more about, as I get to world build more, because this book is longer, so I get to world build more. But I think that red is very tempting because of that family element, and I think that is the most important thing. Yeah.
No, because I just received a question as well from Amish and Frugy, but that actually they came to think that you would make you do have the qualities of a pink as well.
I didn't know I was so slutty. Well, I don't remember what I did last time in Budapest, maybe. Also, this is hard because usually I can like sneak and look what their answers, their questions are, but
No, it's
very little of this is in English.
And the other is handwritten by me, which it makes it worse.
My handwriting's terrible too. I look like an epileptic chihuahua trying to write it. Poor chihuahua, what do you ever do?
Adam also wants to know, are purples born into their cast, or are they being put into it later?
Everyone is born into their cast, and it's part of their DNA, so it's inseparable. It's part of their genetic code, and they have various levels of distinction. Now, not every purple or violet is going to be Mickey the Carver, for instance, but it's one of the reasons why violets are one of the rarest of the colors, is because they do not have that many jobs for creatives, and so it's a very small color, much like the whites are a very small color within this system.
Also, another question. How much influence would you have over the creative decisions if your works would be turned into a movie or a series?
So, movie, you have none. Absolutely none. Zero. Zilch. Nada. I'm running out of adjectives for none. And I actually went down that route initially, and so I had it at Universal Studios, and I wrote the first 2 drafts of the script, which were then replaced by another writer, and that's what happens a lot of times. And anytime it gets made into a movie and the author is involved, it's because the director or the studio really wanted it to be. And so you have really no power in terms of like what's in the contract, but then if you go for the TV route, you have more. That also depends on if you have experience writing screenplays, if you're in Los Angeles, if you package and create the show itself. And so what I've done is, since I got the rights back, so they were going to make a new movie at Universal, and then I got the rights back 2 years ago, which means they're not going to anymore. And that's very, very good because the direction and path we were going down isn't one that I really believed was representative of the series. And so I got the rights back and I packaged them now with the director. So me and a director have been working, and he's fantastic, and I'll probably be like putting out information on that soon. But he's fantastic, and we're going to be taking it and making it a TV show. And so it'll be like a premium what do they call it here? Streaming service. So it'll be on an Amazon or an Apple or something like that as soon as we move forward with progress. So right now we're writing the scripts and putting it all together. But he's a kick-ass director, and it's going to be a lot of fun. But in that type of situation, I have almost complete control in terms of because I get to choose who we bring on. I get to choose because I want to co-write it with someone else, so I'm bringing on another writer so we can work it together, because it's so much more fun when you get to share ideas back and forth. And I've written scripts, but none of them have been made, so I want to bring on someone who is kind of a veteran. So I'm not just learning things the entire way. And that process appeals to me much more so I can expand the world and not just kind of show it through Darrow's eyes the first several seasons, and really expand the world and explore through other characters' eyes, and also world build. And so I can use the knowledge I gained by writing these to inform the decisions of Red Rising. So that'll be a lot of fun.
And any other mediums?
Yeah. I mean, we're working on a video game rights as well. There's a graphic novel or comic book in the United States. So we're kind of exploring all those mediums, yeah.
Another one, because we in Hungary are so far away from all these Comic Cons and these big places where you people are always gathering.
What do you mean, you people?
You also violets, of course. You also violets.
Yeah.
The violets gather and they hold audiences to come on dreads like us. So can you share us any fun stories with like other authors or?
I can't share them. Some of them I can't share. Okay, so like on my first panel I ever did, this was in 2013, so a year before my book ever came out. I'd never been to a Comic-Con. I'd never met any other authors really. And they put me on a panel, and I sit down. So the first one, and the first guy to sit beside me is Patrick Rothfuss. Next guy is Scott Lynch. Next guy is John Scalzi. And then the next guy is Jim Butcher, and I'm just like, oh, fuck. Because everyone in the crowd, so it's a room of like 2,000 people, and they're just staring at me like, who's this guy? And I was like, I'm thinking the same thing. I'm like, I don't know. And so like I have to almost like explain my book in like an elevator pitch, like to the crowd. And they just want to hear Jim Butcher and Pat Rothfuss talk, so I'm just like, no one's here for me. So I stayed quiet kind of the entire time. And then Patrick Rothfuss made a joke about Rorschach in Watchmen. And I just didn't get it because I was kind of like freaked out by being there. So I was like 24 at the time, or 23, 24, and all the guys who were like legends to me were there. So I didn't get the joke, and then he just says, fake nerd alert, go home, fake nerd. I'm like, huh, And I'm like, I'm sorry, what's your name again? I only read novelists who finish their trilogies. And then Patrick, he just does this, like, Jim Butcher stands up and shakes my hand. And Patrick's like, I hate you all. And almost walked out. So for 2 years, I thought Patrick hated me, you know? And so whenever he'd come in the room, I'd be like, I would carefully walk out of rooms. And then, you know, one day we have a panel together, and he turns to me, and he just says, just want to let you know I love your books, man. And I was like, oh my God, but for how long? He's like, for a year, man. I'm like, oh God, I was avoiding you for a year. And so, but it was amazing for me because I had like 4 books I had up when I was writing. Red Rising, one of them was Name of the Wind. And so it was kind of cool to get that affirmation. But also hilarious to know that I was like dodging him for a year, you know? So yeah, that's a good one. I also, on my second panel I was ever on, I was on a panel and it was at a library conference, so it's all librarians in the room. I think I'm like the only man in the room. And so one of the other panelists gets a little bit excited and she's just like, he's just adorable, isn't he? And then she just licks my face up the side. And all the librarians would do this. And actually, the only other guy in the room, my editor, he looks like Gimli from Lord of the Rings. He's like, no! So, you know, every panel I've been on since then has been a lot better because I haven't been licked. So that's not Oh yeah, and when I told Pat Rothfuss that story, because he's, you know, very much about people's rights, you know, protecting people from being harassed and stuff like that, obviously, and so he just said, oh, that's a shameful thing to do. You should do that in private, if ever. But he has a great voice, so it sounded better for him.
And what is the worst question ever you've gotten on a Q&A?
That one. Probably, do you want me to lick the other side? Should be best. My worst one ever. The worst one is, so we know you guys like each other's books. Whose book on this panel did you not like? I'm like, well, all of them, obviously. Yeah, no, that was awkward. We all just kind of sat there like, why do you want us to fight? This isn't like the Hunger Games. We're not going to kill each other off up here. And so you get some stuff like that. I also one time got asked about how they fought in the orbit of Jupiter because the orbital pattern of Io is non-eccentric. So how did they get to Ganymede in the proposed time period? And I'm just like, man, I think you're making stuff up now. And I just said magic, you know. Yeah. You get a lot of questions like that. So if you ask me that question, I'm going to throw something at you.
We still do have some time for fan questions, crowd questions.
Oh yeah, now that we're on that subject.
So please go ahead. You can also ask in Hungarian, ami azt jelenti, hogy magyarul is nyugodtan kérdezhettek, mert majd én lefordítom neki.
I would like to ask if bronzes are underestimated from the rest of the golds because of how they look, or are they really less clever and less strong than real golds?
Could everyone hear that in the back? Do you want to repeat it for them?
So are coppers really weaker and less than the golds, or are golds just, you know, being racist?
So, yes and yes, actually. So it's a complicated question because they are physically weaker. They are, on tests, less intelligent. But I think that often the people who are most disappointing in either the workplace or in life are people who are reported to have very high intelligences. I think that it's very much about how you use your intelligence. And there's a certain thing about street smarts and the slang smarts, for instance, that Darrow has, the ability, so you know, the ability that the individuals like Severo have to use their intelligence in a particular way. That's very hard to measure. I think it's also much more interesting to see who look at like in the United States. What I did as I looked at the Medal of Honor recipients, the ones who won the highest military award in the United States military. And they're never the big, burly, strong, strapping people, guys. They're usually, I mean, like a lot of them are 140 pounds or kilos, that's like what, 60 kilos. And they do something that is insanely, like, incredibly heroic. They rescue 35 guys carrying them on their back, one at a time out of the battlefield, you know? And that's something that Does their size matter? I don't think so. So I think that yes, from a metric perspective, yeah, if we're creating a qualitative test on things, and that's what's fun, is being able to look at that racism that's instituted through test taking, and then being able to dispel that by showing the ability in certain situations where that just does not matter. So yes and no.
You see how your books are getting longer and longer. Is it intentional? Because you got more to read, but is it intentional?
I'm just testing the depth of your dedication. Dude, I wish they were shorter. I'd have more out, you know? But like for some reason, I keep getting more ambitious because I want to tell more story. And I think it's a problem. I want to tell more complexities. And you know, I wouldn't keep writing a book if I wanted to tell the same story. And so as they get, as I want to challenge myself, they sadly get, I mean, not sadly, but it's a byproduct of them getting longer. It's because I'm trying to include more and things like that. I think Dark Age will be about the same length as Iron Gold, but the difficulty in reining it in sometimes is you create so many characters, you want to do them justice. And with just being Darrow's perspective, it was much easier to have that kind of disciplined page count. But as it grows in the story, you start seeing battles on multiple planets, and it's hard to really make it smaller. And so this one, the scope of it is just much larger, and that's why. So, maybe I'll go to, I think Neil Gaiman has it right, his books get like this, smaller, 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 and I'm like, that 140-page book looks fun to write, So maybe the next one will get smaller, I don't know. Not intentional, no, it just happens.
So from where did you get the idea of this color coding system?
Two different things. One is, good question. One is David Foster Wallace read here very much? He wrote Infinite Jest. Well, he's an American writer, and he's a really brilliant guy, but didn't really write that much. But he wrote this very interesting essay about cruise ships, Greek cruise ships, where he wrote this like 40-page article, and it's him talking about the ethnic groupings in the cruise ship jobs. So each different job has a different ethnicity. So the cruise ship captains were Greek because there's a Greek cruise line. The bus boys, I think, were Ethiopian. The secondary crew members were from South Africa. And it was all based, and the waiters were all European. And it was very interesting to see how it all broke down based on the economic, the economic participation was based on who owned the company, what kind of people were coming there. It was mostly Europeans using this cruise line, so they had European waiters. And it was interesting to see that, and so it really kind of opened up the question to me of the anthropology, I guess the anthropology of economics, and started looking into that. But the bigger one was from Plato's Republic. In Plato's Republic, there's a couple lines about the perfect kingdom being ruled by men who are philosopher kings. And philosopher kings are these people who have background in mathematics, background in the social sciences, and in governance. But then beneath them are individuals who are suited for particular tasks, and they say men of iron should do jobs of iron, which is tilling the soil. Men of silver should do jobs of silver, which is handling the coin. And it says, for each man his own position. And I thought that was very interesting to see how I could make that a very noble idea and then pervert it and make it corrupted. Because their idea of making an Iron Man doing an iron task is to destroy what what Plato looked at as negative aspirations or too much ambition, because he thought too much ambition is what destroyed the Greek city-states. And so it's their way of saying each man has a position in life. And I fundamentally disagree with that. And that's why I wanted to make it look like something noble that then got destroyed. Almost every form of government we've ever had looks noble on paper, and then it just gets perverted. And it gets destroyed by human, I guess, weakness or human nature. And so I wanted to see that happen in kind of my commentary on government. So, good question, though. Sorry, it's a long answer.
I have kind of an emotional question. What I really liked about the first 3 books was that you broke our hearts a million times, but you always managed to put it it back together, like not even with a plot line, but sometimes just a word or a phrase. And I read Iron Gold, and it felt like you broke our heart, my heart especially, but it felt like you forgot to put it back together. So was it intentional, that complete devastation throughout the whole book, or not?
So in this fourth book, Pierce just breaks our heart. Sorry everyone, but he will break your heart without putting it back together like in the previous books. Was that intentional? Are you really evil? That's the question. That wasn't part of the question. So I wrote these books, the new series, because I wanted to do something different, and I didn't want it to follow the familiar lines of the first three books. And so yes, it was intentional, but I struggle to answer the question because it'd be me telling you the theme of the new series before you get to read it. But yeah, it was intentional, and you'll see why. And I think that it's very easy to. Oh, here I go explaining it. I think it's very easy to. Okay. I can't say this without sounding horrible. There's a common idea in society that the answer to fear is hope. And I disagree with that. I think it's far more complicated than that. I think hope is something that's very hard to sustain. Hope is something romantic that has to be constantly reinforced. And I think that something that is far more inspirational than hope, and the thing that actually brings down governments and changes the world, is endurance and stubbornness and the inability to give up. And so that's what this new series is about. And I think that theme being different than the initial one is why I wanted to write it. And hopefully you'll get to see how I explore that in the next one.
So you mentioned that you read like 5 or 10 hours a day. So I like to ask, it ever happened that you got a huge writer's block, so you just couldn't write for days, and if it happened, how could you manage to get over it?
She asked if I have writer's block and how do I get over it. Yeah, I've had it before. I had it halfway through Morning Star. I had it right before they went to Quicksilver's business or his home on Phobos, because I didn't know how the interaction would go. You know, I didn't know what the rest of it would be like. Was this also, and also having done Golden Sun and really enjoyed writing that one, I wanted to know, is this true to the story, you know? And so I think the difficulty with writer's block is not that you don't know what to say, it's you don't know which path to take. So you'll reach a place and you'll have 13, 14, 50 different places you can take the story, and you wonder, well, which one resonates most with readers? Which one is the least expected? Which one is the most thematically important, right? And then you realize, wait. And it'll take you months sometimes to realize this. It's not about what impacts readers the most, really. It's what story do I enjoy telling the most. Because hopefully that'll resonate. Because I can't write just for your predictions, you know. I can't write just to make you happy, because I can't look at the world through your brains, right, through your eyes. So all I can do is do the story that I enjoy. And it's sometimes so hard to remember to do that and to just jump in a certain direction. And oftentimes, the only way you get over writer's block is actually by writing. Like, I'll try everything. I'll take showers, I'll go for a run, I'll watch movies, I'll get drunk, I'll do anything, you know? Like, at the end of this bottle, there's the answer. Nope, it's not down there. And what it always ends up being is you have to write the wrong path in order to find out what the right one is. And so oftentimes I'll write like 40 pages and I'm like, wait, that's not right at all. And I'll actually have to delete all those pages or put them aside, saying I'll use them later and never do. And then you write what is right. I mean, I just had that happen on a chapter in the latest book before I came here. I wrote a whole chapter and realized it was the wrong path to go down, and I deleted it and had to restart over. But I'm confident now because I know that the path because the problem is you're always regretting the path not taken. But if you take that path and realize it's not the right one, sometimes you need that to find the real path. So yeah, writer's blocks are difficult. Are you a writer?
I'm trying.
Yeah. So the only way to beat it is by writing. And the only way to write is not to pretend like you're going to come up with your beautiful idea while you're just away from the computer or away from the pen and paper. It's actually starting to write. Because you got to get past that conscious level of trying to figure out your story. And when you're writing, it's starting to flow out of you, you'll think so much smarter and the answers will appear on page. Hopefully.
Thank you.
Have you planned to build a universe completely different and independent from Red Rising, or will you expand the Red Rising universe in your next books?
So, will he write more and more and more in this universe, or change universes after a while?
So my only plan is to finish this series, is to have 6 books in the Red Rising world, and then to write a fantasy series I've been dying to write for a long time, which is kind of like a cross between like a really mean Harry Potter and Indiana Jones and American Gods. So like that's what I want to do next. And I'm kind of aching to do that. So I mean, but I love this series, and the only reason I'm writing 3 more is because I am yearning to do it. You know, it's because I love it. I don't know what path the story to take after these 3, so I'll have to see if I'll ever want to write anymore. But I know I really have to like have a purpose and a reason for doing it, and the real like kind of evolution has to happen. But I want to write more fantasy. I want to write, you know, another science fiction story I have. So yeah, there'll be a lot of other worlds. There's so many things to explore, man. You know.
Igen, nekem nagyjából ugyanez lett volna a kérdésem, hogy szívesen kipróbálná magát még más műfajban, hogyha ezt befejezte, és nem science fiction, hanem romantikus,
So would you ever consider writing something else, not sci-fi or fantasy, but like romantic fiction or something like that?
Romantic fiction, no. Erotic fiction, yes. The story just has to kind of find you, but yeah, I mean, I'd love to write historical fiction. I'd love to write like a great historical romance, something like that. But I think first and foremost, there's 2 stories that I really desperately want to write, and both of them are not science. Well, one's like metaphysical. How do I describe that? It's a spiritual journey in a way. And then the other one is, you know, kind of the fantasy one I told you about. But then I also write for TV and film, and so I've written things outside of science fiction and fantasy there. And I have one like literary thing I really enjoy, and also a thriller. And yeah, I have a lot of things I want to do. I wish I had more time.
Have you ever read anything from Hungarian writers?
So I was just actually asking for recommendations because in the United States so few Hungarian writers are translated, and it's difficult to find material a lot of times. And so if you guys have any recommendations, please write them down because I will not be able to spell it. And I think that's a lot of times the difficulty in the United States because especially literarily, stuff flows out. Flowing in is difficult unless it kind of is the popular book at the moment, like Girl with the Dragon Tattoo. Or, actually no, most of them are crime fiction from Norway right now. They're translated, or books of poetry by Spanish writers, or Arabic a lot of times, but no Hungarian so far. But, very excited too.
Az utolsó, the last one.
What advice would you give to someone who has a lot of good ideas for difference in books, but really struggles to sit down and get started?
Are they good ideas? Really? No. Okay. I would say, what makes it difficult for you to get started?
Inhibitions?
Yeah, right? So what you need to do is take away the consequences of failure. You have this imagined idea that if you screw it up, then the story's dead. No, man, you have good ideas. You can try to make them happen 50 times in different ways until you find out how to do it. Start by just doing it without consequences. Expect to be bad at it, and then to kind of fumble your way through. And if you're having difficulty based on inhibitions, start in the middle of the book, or start on the second chapter, or write the last scene. You don't have to approach it like it's some precious sculpture, you know, that every stroke you take is going to be fatal, or that it's going to affect the final image. It's not that way when you write. You're probably going to write a book that you don't like, and then you're probably going to reapproach the idea. Because actually, the funny thing is, my first book I wrote, that epic fantasy I told you about, it was about a slave miner. Yeah, I didn't even remember that until I wrote Golden Sun, and I started remembering, and I looked back at that first book, and so many of the ideas from that book were in Red Rising. They just weren't refined. They were just in a different landscape. And so I'd say, take away the fear of failure, take away the fear of consequences, and when you're feeling good, when you have if you have a beer in hand or something, just take out your pencil and start doing something that brings that world to life in some way. Because once you start putting down one thing, something will grow on that, and grow on that, and grow on that. So it's about growth. And then it'll become exponential, and you'll feel carried away by it. But mostly, be easy on yourself. Expect to be bad, you know? I was, still am.
Hölgyeim és uraim, ladies and gents, Pierce Brown.
Oh, thank you guys. One thing, I want you guys, this is for the Instagrams. So I want you guys to, we're gonna do something a little bit nerdy. All right, on 3, I want a best howl or howl you can do. All right, I know, you think it's not cool, I see your face, you think it's a little dweeby, yeah? Yeah, but I'm gonna peer pressure you into this, all right? So on 3, 1, 2, 3. Hungry! All right, I'll leave it. 1, 2, 3. Oh! Not into it at all, but okay, thanks guys.